And welcome back to the Sports Night interview. And today we are joined by John Hickman, who is the host of the pot. Oh, I just screwed that up. Let me do that again.
No
Three,
problem.
2, 1. And welcome back to another Sports Night interview. And today we are joined by John Hickman, who is the host of the Locked On Texans podcast. And John, we thank you so much for making a few minutes for us today. And I got to tell you, I was talking with a Texans beat writer just a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about possibly the Texans being the best team in the AFC. But after a couple losses and some key injuries just a few weeks later, all of a sudden things are looking a little bit dicey for the Texans. Now, offensively, they've had some struggles. What
Right.
can they do to try to get this offense back on track?
The first thing they need to do is they gotta create some protection for CJ Stroud. I mean, against the New York Jets, 8 sacks were registered. And for the city of Houston, they have little sports PTSD because of the David Carr, because of the Deshaun Watson and how much he had to utilize his legs. And I think ultimately that kind of held Houston back a little bit in both those eras. With CJ, we know that he's much more of a traditional pocket quarterback. He can use his legs, but he always looks to keep his eyes downfield. The problem is, hey, listen, I can keep my eyes downfield all I want to, but I got guys in my face in the second and a half, 2 seconds. And so he's been taking a lot of hits over the last couple of weeks. I think he's up to 15 in the last 3 weeks, 30 on the season as of right now. No successful offense would be able to sustain success without being able to protect your quarterback. And he's a franchise quarterback. He's a stellar, dynamic quarterback. Houston's offense hasn't been able to see that because of those hits.
Yeah, you mentioned the 8 sacks on Thursday Night Football against the Jets. They're number 2 in the league right now, giving up the most sacks in the entire league. So definitely something they have to get right. Is this something that you fear that if they can't get this problem corrected, that this could derail, the hopes that they have to make a deep playoff run?
Absolutely. Listen, so the bigger issue combining with the offensive line has been the inconsistency and or the inability of their offensive play caller and Bobby Sloyd to help out both CJ Stroud in the offensive line. Down here in Houston, we've been beating the tables, beating our chest, screaming to the top of our lungs. So, hey, let's get some of these quick passes going. Let's get it out quickly to kind of negate teams' pass rush. And we understand that the inside offensive line has struggled in terms of communication, in terms of being able to pick up twist stunts, blitz, the whole nine. And right now, the offensive tackles look a couple of steps slow as well. So they've been getting beat up on a lot, and you still see a lot of longer developing route type of plays from Houston. They want that big shot down the field. CJ has talked about that dating back to his rookie year. He wants those deep shots, but the opportunities have been limited simply due to Nico Collins being out
Yeah.
and not having the time in the pocket to stand while the routes develop. So it's a combination of the offensive coordinator and the offensive line having to come together and say, we got to do better. And I think right now at this point, guys are just completely over it. People
Yeah.
believe there needs to be a change.
Yeah, yeah, and well, one of those changes could be through trade. I mean, the trade deadline, we're coming up against it Tuesday, 4 p.m. Eastern time. There's not, starting tackles and guards that are going to be on the market, but is there anything that the Texans can do to try to be active here at the deadline and try to upgrade that offensive line a little bit?
Evan, I'm not 100% sure. The Houston Texans are operating right now just under $6 million.
Wow.
So you're looking at a team that will have to maybe overpay in terms of pick. Can they afford that again? Nick Caserio loves to trade up. He's one of those guys that have traded up every year since being in Houston. And they're going to have to look at whatever player that they are interested in to see how much of that player's contract will teams be willing to take on to facilitate that trade. And the lack of salary cap money that Houston has right now is kind of hindering them in terms of being able to make a signing for a big player. I think for Houston, though, they got to look in-house. Number one, don't know how long Houston will have Chris Strouser as their offensive line coach. Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, the offensive line in the last 2 years compared to year one to this year, they've regressed and guys just look older and technique problems are still an issue. And so I think it starts at the top and then also with the players and the personnel. They got to give Jared Patterson a shot. He's the guy that stepped in for Kenyon Green against the a couple of weeks ago, the games 2 weeks ago against the Colts, stepped up and the Texans scored on that drive, but he goes out with a concussion. So I think, maybe moving him back to center, maybe moving Juice Scruggs to left guard, seeing what the rookie Blake Fisher can give you on that offensive line as well. Drafted in the second round, they have a lot of high hopes for him. Not sure if he's a tackle in the NFL right now, but if he can give you better opportunities and snaps at right guard, over Shaq Mason, see what they have. I think they're going to have to really get creative to figure out, okay, schematically, how can we protect our quarterback? In what ways can we really say we got to do better in this area to help out our offensive line and give them time? And maybe it's, they got to look at thank you for your service for some of those guys and say we're going to move on and switch the lineup. They got an extra, couple of days due to playing on Thursday before they play and take on the Detroit Lions. That's going to be a tough game. They got to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. What about their head coach, DeMeco Ryans? Last year he had a very, very successful rookie year, and he looked like he was on the way to becoming one of the league's great young coaches. He's had to deal with a lot of adversity this year. We've been talking about the struggles along the offensive line. You briefly touched on some of the injuries. We know Nico Collins has been out for some time. They lose Stephon Diggs for the year. How do you think he has done managing this team and kind of guiding them through some rough waters here?
I think DeMeco's done a damn good job. You got to look at what DeMeco was working with coming into the year. No Christian Harris at this point, and I think that we're not going to see him for the season. So now you're looking at guys like a Henry To'oTo'o, the veteran Neville Hewitt. They get Azeez Al-Shire over from Tennessee, but a couple of guys that have to kind of play above the expectation. Same with Jalen Petrie, who I think has been a top 10 player for this Texans team this year. So in terms of coaching and getting things right on the field, I think he's done a very good job. There's been some secondary concerns in terms of, why are we not seeing Derek Stingley on Devontae Adams when you have him on that field, but yet and still we're seeing Jalen Petrie put in some compromising situations covering some of those slot receivers or wide receiver ones. On that touchdown to Devontae Adams against the New York Jets, it was Jalen Petrie. He was beat right off the line. So I think that's something in a curve that he needs to get over as a coach, making sure that the personnel matches offensive teams' personnel, especially when teams go wide out. You don't want to continue to put Jalen Petrie in a compromising situation. But overall, you come into this season, no Danico Autry for 6 games to kick it off, no Christian Harris, year 2 of Henry T. What does that look like? You got new guys over, Mario Edwards and Folu Fadakausi. Those guys were playing absolutely great. Tim Settle has been playing good football. He's been doing what he needs to do on the defensive side of the ball, aside from a couple of compromising decisions. Overall, I still think this is a good year 2 for him.
Yeah, Will Anderson, he was injured last week, leads the team with 7.5 sacks. If he is to miss extended time, how will they try to replace some of that production?
Danico Autry, getting him back. He had 2 sacks against the New York Jets, first as a Texan, but also in the offseason, they signed a big man, big grown man out here from Houston, and that's Daniil Hunter. Played at LSU, spent his first few years in the NFL, his career rather, in Minnesota. Lately, in the last couple of games, you're starting to see him going a little bit more. So he's making a lot of money, and with making a lot of money comes a lot of expectations. And I think he's been quiet for the better part of this season, but we're starting to see him come on. So if Will Anderson goes down, the expectation is, hey, for you two guys that we signed in the offseason and for Danico Autry relatively, for him fresh, we need for you to kind of replicate what Will Anderson was doing for our team.
Yeah. The Texans pretty comfortable lead right now in the division. I don't think they're going to be challenged by anybody here looking at, the rest of the season. Yeah, they're going to get into the playoffs, but looking ahead at the schedule, they do have some tough games coming up. You mentioned the game with the Lions. That's going to be a very tough one. I think it'll be a good measuring stick for the Texans. I know they've got injuries and whatnot. The offense is struggling right now. But if you want to compete with the big boys and you want to be considered one of the top teams, this is a game that you want to play well in and let everybody know that you're a team to be reckoned with. What's some of your thoughts on the game this week?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't agree with you more. They've dropped games to Green Bay. They've dropped games to Minnesota. So, like, we're looking at a team that, yeah, they beat the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo's in a weak division right now, but they had a very good outing against Buffalo and Josh Allen. I mean, made Josh Allen look like the rookie quarterback from when he came into the league. That's great. Had a great game against Indy to open up the year. You know, an amazing defensive second half against Chicago. They put together some good performances, but those games doesn't necessarily matter when you lose to a Green Bay Packer team in the fashion that you did. The New York Jets was a 2-16 that lost 5 games in a row. So I look at Detroit as one of those games where they gotta have it.
Yeah.
If teams are going to respect you around the league, if the league is going to respect you around the league, hell, if their own fans are going to respect you around the league, that's the game you got to find a way to win through the adversity. I understand players are missing, but you got an additional couple days to figure it out. And I think it's going to lie on the shoulders of Bobby Sloyd, getting out of his own way as a play caller, working with the offensive staff to figure out how can we maximize the players and talent that we have on this roster. But Detroit, I think, is a must-win game.
And they got a couple other tough ones on there. The Ravens still and the Chiefs conference games, which will be big as well. Possibly could have some playoff seeding implications there. But John Hickman, everybody, Locked On Texans podcast. John, we thank you for the time today.
Thank you for having me on.